What are two things that you can do to conquer fear? If you want to find out, make sure that you tune in to the rest of this episode. My name's Adam McKenzie, and welcome to my weekly mindset video. And fear is a subject as well as a, let's call it, condition that a lot of people stay stuck with. They stay trapped under. They allow to dictate their life, their choices, their actions, their reactions, their emotions, the level of anxiety. Everything that they do to a certain extent can be dictated around fear or by fear. And it's incredible when you look at this, because if you understand human biology and you understand the way that we're designed in terms of fight or flight, in terms of the reptile brain, in terms of us being able to react to certain things out of protection or out of the need to survive. When you understand all of that, and then you look at human psychology and you look at the sort of things that create fear in our lives now, and I'll give you some silly context here, but I love it, is if you look back at the 60s, right? Everybody had these big station wagons, these big cars, no airbags, no seatbelts. Kids would get thrown in the back. You slid all around. I remember just jumping in the back of the car and just sitting in like the station wagon boot, rolling around in there while we were driving, and no one cared. And I'm not saying that there wasn't a level of risk in that, but there wasn't this fear around it either. Whereas now you can be strapped in with $1,000 car seat and million airbags and drive this and drive that. But like statistically, we have more accidents than ever. Sure, there's more cars on the road, more population, all of that contributes to it. But the whole point is that we just didn't fear things like that because we didn't create that reality. And it's something that we're going to dive into now. All right. Is that what is fear in the first place? And why does fear exist around things now, either for you or society, when they didn't exist before? Like, what's changed for you or what's changed around you? Because ultimately, fear is your perception around something that is going to happen, or it's fear around something that has happened to you once and you had a bad experience, or you suffered pain or trauma or something like that. Especially if you were at a younger age where you felt helpless, or if you're in a situation where you feel helpless to either dictate the outcome back then, or you don't know how you're going to handle the outcome coming up. And when you look at all of these things as a whole, right, there's a very clear, I think you'd call it pattern, or there's a clear way to identify what fear means to you and how much you're allowing fear to dictate you and what you do. All right. And that comes down to your reality. So if I look at everything, it's your reality based on the past. It's a reality based on how you see the future. It's your perception around both. It's what you've been told as growing up. It's what you've seen. It's what your experiences have led you to. It's what you're exposed to. It's everything on social media. It's the whole way that children are raised now, that everybody gets a participation medal because fear of failure and not being good enough is like higher than it's ever been before. All of these things come down to your reality. And if your reality is not what you want, and if your reality is dictated by fear of the past and then fear of the future, you're always going to stay stuck. And you're not only going to stay stuck, but you're not going to do a lot of the things that you want to do because of this. You're almost bouncing in this room. If you go back and visit the past, there's all of these fears associated with it. And if you want to move forward into the future, there's also all of these fears. I don't know why those things pop up, but I'll take the thumbs up. Ultimately, you then stay trapped. And then people get this level of anxiety. And this is where panic attacks come from and all of these different reactions, because you literally feel like you've been trapped and you don't know what to do. And the angst builds up, the uncertainty builds up, the overwhelm builds up. and then you stay stuck. And then these things get bigger and bigger and heavier and heavier. And then you attach all of these different emotions and reactions, like physical reactions, crying, screaming, heart rate racing through the roof, and a panic attack. If you break it down psychologically and physiologically, it is worry that leads to a physical reaction. So think about that. It's something that I'm worried about that I focus on so much that it actually creates a physical reaction in me, which is angst, which then turns into anxiety. Whereas worry on its own is just worry. If I allow myself to continue to worry and worry about it at a level that it then turns into anxiety, I have caused that. And when people say that I have anxiety and everything else, like we all live with anxious feelings and anxious reactions. But to say I have anxiety is again another label that society has put on you. And it's even medicating now for you when you don't fucking need it. It's been proven like thousands and thousands of times that you don't need anxiety medication in order to cure anxiety. Breath work alone helps 75% of people. Think about that. Learning how to breathe properly, coming back to the present, coming back into your body, cures anxiety for 75% of the people that are exposed to it. All right. And again, they're all test groups and they're all stats based on subject groups. But ultimately, it's not medicine. It's not anything I'm having to think about. It's not anything that I'm having to change, and nothing crazy, just breathing. When we start to stack all of these things up, and you're somebody that deals with anxiety all the time, then you're taking numbing agents, which is what I would call the medication around it. You never learn how to cope with fear. And if you don't know how to cope with fear, how the fuck do you ever think you're going to overcome it? And think about it. As a kid growing up, there were things that you'd never done before that you were scared of. And then once you did them, you're on the other side of it and you're not afraid of it anymore. And I give this example with my daughter often, right? Like we went to Dreamworld on the Gold Coast, and I'll do anything. Like I'll do anything, even if it scares the shit out of me, I'll do it because I love conquering that within myself. And I went on the roller coaster, went in the front, and my daughter really wanted to go with me because she was finally tall enough to go. And I'm like, okay, let's go. Then we get to the front of the line and she's kicking and screaming and crying and everything else. And I'm like, look, I'm not going to force you to do this, but if you want to conquer it, you can do it. Anyway, she wouldn't get on. So I went on, rode around. When I came back, she wasn't there. She was with her friend. And she decided after watching me do it and standing there that she would then jump on and do it. And then next thing you know, I hear this screaming, I did it. And like the elation on her face. And then she wanted to go with me again straight away. So think about that, like physical reaction, crying, screaming, kicking, like torture at the thought of getting on this roller coaster, to then doing it on her own accord. Like she got herself to do it. If I'd forced her to do it, it never would have been her choice. And sometimes people need a nudge and a push, which she got with me to get to the front of the line. But once she was there, like I was not going to force that physical reaction, because then that creates a negative connection. So ultimately, she made the choice. And when she made the choice, she conquered the fear. And not only that, but she actually realized that she enjoyed it. It was an adrenaline rush. She had a great time. And then she wanted to go again and again and again. And now she's learned that. And when we go to water parks, when she does things like that, she was ultimately the most fearful out of all three of my kids. And now she's the one that will jump on anything. Anything. Even if it scares her, because she knows on the other side of it what that was like. And she knows that if she can get through that, she'll experience that again. So she created a positive connection and a new reality. And that's what I want to empower you with today, is like 2 specific things that you can work on to conquer fear. First, I just wanted you to understand what fear is for most of you. And all fear is a reality that you're creating. It's a reality that you're creating based on things from the past, and a reality that you're creating based on things that you think will happen in the future. The crazy part is that what happened to you in the past was maybe a one-off occurrence. Who knows? It's specific for all of us. Doesn't mean that because it happened once then, that it'll happen every other time. That's a fact. And then two, the reality that you're creating based on a future you haven't experienced yet is like your imagination. Like you don't know. We don't know what we don't know. And if you've never experienced it, how can you create that reality for yourself when it hasn't happened yet? But people do this all the time. And they do it to the point where they have a physical reaction. Now I need pills for anxiety. No, you don't. You just need to fucking conquer these two things that I'm about to give you now. All right. First thing, once you understand your reality, and sometimes you have to understand your reality by what are my fears and where do they come from? Okay, so that would be the first place I would start before even looking at these two things. All right. The first one, what do you know to be true? So you've discovered your current reality or you've got awareness around it, right? So let's say that's where you start. So you understand that right now, these are my fears or these are the things that I'm afraid of. Could be getting into another relationship, could be getting hurt again, could be stepping out of your current job, could be fear of failing again when you want to lose weight and get in shape. It could be fear of connecting with somebody that you wanted to connect with, whatever it might be. Those are your fears and that's your current reality. The first thing that we need to do is we need to go from these perceived things based on the past and the future to what do you know? What are the facts that, like I said before, you don't know what you don't know? So, for instance, whoever said that at your mid-40s that you can change your career? And in your mind, you're like, people said that by then I should be doing this and I should be doing that. And then if I try that and I fail, then what am I going to do? And how am I going to support my kids? And how am I going to do all of these things? All of these different things will come up. But what do you know? I know that I don't like what I'm doing. I'm not getting any joy or fulfillment out of it anymore. I know that this is an opportunity that if I do it right, it has this potential outcome. It also has risks. But what do I know? I know what I can do. I know what my work ethic is. I know what I'm willing to do. I know what it's taken for me to succeed in the past. And I know what's important for me. So I know what I'm working towards. Right? Those are things that we can own in terms of what we know. Do you know whether you're going to succeed or fail? No, ultimately you don't. But do you know whether you're willing to keep working until you do succeed? Yes, you do. Do you know whether or not you're willing to continue to show up when things get hard, when you are scared, when there is doubt, when there is uncertainty, when there are things that are unknown, when there is risk of failure or looking stupid in your eyes or bad or whatever word you want to attach to it? Will you still show up? What do you know about you? And this is the biggest issue where most people stay stuck is because they don't trust themselves. They don't even know themselves, but yet they're asking themselves to do things around fear. And then they wonder why they get stuck, but they have no certainty on who they are and what they know about themselves because they haven't built trust with themselves. You haven't proven to yourself over and over again that you're willing to put in the work. You haven't proven to yourself over and over again that when things get tough, you're not going to fucking bail and give up on yourself. So you don't know. And then you're trying to create conviction to take on things that involve getting through fear. But all of your reality is based on things that you don't know. They're based on things that you imagine or things that happened in the past. They have nothing to do with what you know about you now or what you know about what you're going to do in the future. And the best way to determine this is listen to your languaging. When you talk about things in the future, do you talk about them in terms of how you're going to show up? Do you talk about them in terms of what you know about you that is in relation to how you're going to conquer those things or what you're going to do to deal with those things or what you're going to do to get over whatever you might have to get over? I guarantee you your languaging is not like that. It's all about how this might happen and that could happen if that happens and I can't do that. And you have all of these stories around these realities that haven't even happened yet. So just ask yourself that simple question. What do I know? And if it's, for me, here is one that I'll share with you guys. do I really think that I will find somebody that love me the way I want to be loved? That was a tough one for me. Still is. And I had to get to the reality of understanding that right now, I know I want to be loved. And it's funny, the more that I choose that, the more that I find the types of people that in my life give me the level of love that I've always wanted. That's separate from the love that I have for myself. But to sit there like I did after my second divorce and say to myself that the love that I want doesn't exist, that maybe I'm not ever going to find what I want when it comes to love. That was a thought pattern around something that I didn't know. I know that I want to be loved, and I know that I'm willing to put myself out there to try and find somebody that can love me and will love me the way that I want. That's what I know. And is there uncertainty and doubt? Was there fear and insecurity and everything else back then when I was pretty torn up? Of course there was. But I put myself out there. I started dating, started talking to people again, started to do things after getting through a really ugly period in my life. And I share that with you because the context around this is irrelevant. It's whatever is holding you back, because fear is your catalyst to change. Fear is the biggest wall that you're putting in the way of transformation. Your fears have become your excuses and your stories and your reality. Like, most of you are living based on your fears, not based on your passions and your purpose. And people throw around those words like they're fucking nothing, and I get it. But ultimately, that's how you're living. You're not living every day because you're passionate about growing and empowering yourself and challenging yourself and getting out there and embracing every single day. You're living based on conditions that you've created for yourself around the fears that you have. I don't do that. I'm not that sort of person. I can't do that. And here's the key. You don't fucking know. You don't know. So ask yourself the question, what do I know? And base your choices and decisions around what you know to be true. And here's the thing about all of these things that are unknown. The only thing that you know to be true when you spend the time getting to know you is you. You need to build the trust in you and the knowledge and the faith and the type of relationship with yourself that you know you and you know how you're going to deal with whatever comes up. That's what I know. And when I can come from that place, everything else that is out of my control, I deal with based on what I know about me. That's it. I am never going to be able to control circumstances, situations, and other people. It's just never going to happen. It's impossible. So I can only focus on controlling me in each of these different environments. Whether it's anxiety, whether it's depression, whether it's panic attacks, whether it's you having fear of failure, you feeling shame and guilt around doing something for yourself. Whatever the story is, like most people that don't do something for themselves and they sit there and they feel like they're sacrificing themselves, the only reason they do that is fear of rejection or fear of somebody not accepting what they want to do for themselves. And then they sugarcoat it around words like sacrifice and I do what I need to do for my family. Fuck that. You're literally living a lie because you're not willing to face the fear. Okay? What do you know? Second thing I want to give you, all right, is how do you train away fear? Because once we understand it and we know it and we gain it, we know where it comes from and we can see it and we know what we know about ourselves and everything else, cool. Now we're in this beautiful place of awareness. If you haven't listened to my last couple of videos, go back and listen to them because I talk about how awareness is literally just a trap that most people stay stuck in. And it's where most gurus lead you to. They're like, open the door and they put you in this beautiful place of awareness and then they close the doors and you don't know what the fuck to do. What we want to try and do now that you've gained awareness and you know what you need to know about you, how do we train ourselves to deal with fear? All right. I was listening to an audiobook the other day, and this guy, like, he had, for me, almost crazy, especially if you're like me around spiders and snakes and sharks and stuff like that. But I got to give this guy credit. And I can't remember his name. He's a Frenchman. And he went across the Twin Towers on a tightrope. Like, yeah, it's called The Wire. If you want to watch the movie, it's called The Wire. And if you read this guy's book, okay, he explains the whole story and the fact that this one feat took him 7 years to pull off. But part of what he had to pull off in his training to free walk this wire, he's not tied into anything. He is free walking. All of the wind, all of the weather conditions, frost on the wire, all of these things, all of these different things and events he did leading up to it, he had to conquer fear. And you think about that, like that level of fear, right? Most people couldn't even put their head over the side of the building with this massive rush of, holy crap, my life's about to end, the feeling I'm talking about. And what this guy did is he realized that he's been afraid of spiders his whole life, especially tarantulas. So he literally went and bought a tarantula and he kept it at his house, and he continued every single day to start, 1, touch it, then 2, touch it with 2 fingers, then touch it with my whole hand, then let it run up my hand, till eventually he would put it on his face and he would let it crawl around his face. Now, I don't know about you, but that freaks me out. But he did this in a concise way for one particular reason. He wanted to conquer his fear. And he realized that his fear was arbitrary. It was in his head. It was something that he was afraid of since a child. And ultimately, he wanted to beat this, but he just didn't know how. Rather than trying to figure out how, he knew that he could do X, Y, and Z. So he continued to do it until ultimately he learned something about himself. He learned that he could deal with this fear by dealing with the fear. And it's the biggest thing I shared with you about my daughter on the roller coaster. It's the biggest thing that I shared with you about getting back out there and getting into relationships again for myself. And I know that somewhere in your life, you have a positive anchor around where you've conquered fear. You've done something with a certain outcome that scared you. And you got to the other side of it and you realized it wasn't as bad as you thought it was going to be, or you realized that the fear was only conceived in your mind and it wasn't actually a reality. You don't know what you don't know and in order to train our reaction to fear, now that we understand where it's coming from, we understand what we know about ourselves, is to actually now go and do it. So if you're afraid of communicating, like I've got a beautiful client at the moment who's been afraid of communicating because her fear was that people wouldn't see her as smart enough. People wouldn't see her as being eloquent enough, being able to communicate at a level where she felt she could seem intelligent enough. And ultimately, I'm like, okay, cool. Where did that fear come from? Boom. What do we know about you? You have no problem communicating and speaking. Like, we talk and I have no problem understanding you and you know exactly what to say. So what's the fear? The fear is now you haven't done it. So now go and do it. And as you continue to do it, guess what? That fear starts to dissipate. That fear starts to change and transform until it's no longer a fear at all. It's not even something you think about anymore. Whereas before you would sweat and huff and puff and heart rate would go through the roof and you would cry and you would then feel a level of shame because you wouldn't do what you wanted to do. And you're hiding in this little tiny box, even though you want to express yourself and burst out of the box. And then you stayed stuck. And then we stay stuck behind this wall of fear again. Whereas when you do it and you continually push the boundary, it's why I will do anything adrenaline-wise, right? There's one thing I want to do, and I think I have to challenge myself around it, is that's the shark tanks. Like jumping in a tank where the sharks come and attack you in the tank. I should do it just for this reason alone. All right. So I'm not going to say I won't, but yeah, that's been a big one for me. But ultimately, the more of these things that I face, the more that I realize that fear isn't a reason not to do something. I want you to hear that again. Fear is not a reason not to do something. And I have a perspective shift that I'll gift you that if you take on will change your entire view around this. If it doesn't scare me, then I'm not going to grow enough. The more that it scares me, the more that I'm going to grow. All right. I've had that perspective now for almost 20 something years. Because ultimately, if I feel afraid, if I feel fear, I know that I'm going to go through something or gain something that I haven't previously had. Either an experience, either an adrenaline rush, either a new perspective when I get to the other side, either a new lesson that I could have learned or gained, or now a whole brand new reality of what it takes to go from X to Y and what it's taken for other people to do that. So when I understand where people are at, I can now talk to them based on the fact that, hey, I felt like that too, but now I'm over here because I went through that process. I walked and I embraced and I took on the fear. Now I get to see things from this perspective. And trust me, you want to be over here. So now you can help and bring other people with you. And ultimately, you're no longer allowing fear to dictate your ability to do the things that you want to do, to take the actions that you want to take, and to also control your reactions. Because if my reactions are based around fears, and those fears are things that haven't even happened yet, that I don't even know, it's I'm afraid of my imaginary friend. And that every time I think I see my imaginary friend, I had this crazy ass reaction. Like, it doesn't make sense when I break it down like that, does it? But yet this is how you're operating. So like anything, we need to train that. We need to train that by taking on little things, taking on little challenges, taking on things that make you afraid. And when you do this and you get to the other side of it, you'll see exactly what happens. These fears just go. It's not even a matter of every single time you got to face the same shit again to get to the other side. No, it's literally just a matter of you doing it a few times until you no longer even have to think about doing it. You just do it. And that's a gift I want you to give yourselves. So if fear has been holding you back and you want help and you want to understand you better, and you want to go through an identity shift that is going to help you understand what's been in your way, but ultimately what's going to create the best, what I call 2.0 version of you, okay, then I would love to invite you to jump into my identity shift process with me, all right? It takes less than 4 weeks, and it is not expensive at all, all right? You get to work with me one-on-one for those entire 4 weeks to guarantee that you get to the other side knowing exactly what it's going to take for you to be the best you. All right. If that interests you, comment below identity shift or send me a message or an email at adam@ilovechanginglives.com. And ultimately, I want to see you taking on your fears. And if there's something that's been holding you back, comment below. Let me know, because I'd love to hear how you're going to take that on and what it's going to be like for you when you get to the other side. Otherwise, I will catch you next week.